Hi, welcome. Thank you all so much for coming. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jesse Anderson. I am a clinical professor of law here at the University of Utah College of Law. I'm the director of the Innocence Clinic, and I'm also the legal director of the Rocky Mountain Innocence Center. The Rocky Mountain Innocence Center is a small nonprofit that looks at cases of wrongful conviction in Utah, Wyoming, and Nevada. Our entire staff is here. Our executive director, Blair Hodson, is here in the front row in the ARC-style sweater. And then our managing attorney, Jennifer Springer, and our staff attorney, Josie Hall, and our BYU fellow, Tammy Shield. That's our staff to cover 3 states. We have 51 cases in investigation and 10 cases in litigation. So we're a really busy little group. I hope that hearing Kristine Bunch today will allow you to put a face to the work that we do and perhaps inspire some of you to take the Innocence Clinic next year. It's a clinic that's offered here during your 2nd or 3rd year. You take an innocence law class that's really practically based, and then you actually work on cases for these individuals who claim they're wrongfully convicted. So I really hope this might light a fire for you. And I don't want to say much more. Please, if you have questions, email me, stop by my office, which is on the south side of the 3rd floor. The RMIC offices are on the 4th floor, in the middle, a research pod thing. So please, if you have questions or you'd like to talk with us, please don't hesitate to do that. But what we're really here to do today is to hear from this really remarkable woman that I have known for several years and have gotten to know better since she's here. And she blows me away. She inspires me. I don't even understand the kind of strength that she has for what she's been through. And I'm going to let her tell you her story because she can do it a million times better than I could ever do it. So please, will you welcome Kristine Bunch.
Hello, everyone. In 1995, I was a single 21-year-old mom, and I had a beautiful 3-year-old son, and I worked, and I went to school, and I was trying to do the very best I could for my little guy, who I certainly didn't plan on, but enjoyed once I had him. And one morning, I had decided he'd been kind of fussy, and we stayed up late, so I decided we were just going to sleep in. When I woke up, I couldn't really grasp what was happening. I remember thinking it was foggy inside my house because I couldn't really see. And you know, when you first wake up, you don't really grasp what's happening. I mean, eventually the realization hit that my home was on fire and my son was in his bedroom. So I went immediately into that bedroom, and I couldn't get in. There was fire in the doorway. And so you hear when you're a kid, put something on it, smother it. So I picked up the blankets and pillows that were right there on the couch where I'd fallen asleep, and I put those things on them, and they just melted in my hands. And so I panicked, and I run out the door screaming, and I'm hollering for my neighbors, and I pick up my son's tricycle. And I bust out the bedroom window, and I try to climb in and get him. My neighbors are there by this time, and they pull me out because the flames have shot through the roof. And they tell me that I need to wait for firemen to get there. And so I fight them a little. I tried to go back in the front door, and if they'd let me, I believe I would have stayed in there and not come out. But they held me back, and they put me in the ambulance. And I waited. And as they come in, I said, "Did you find him?" And that statement would haunt me forever because, of course, they thought that meant that I already knew he was dead. In truth, I'm just a young mom who knew that I couldn't find my son. And I wanted to know somebody found him because I just believed they were going to take him to the hospital and he would get oxygen and he would be treated for burns, but he was going to be okay. I would just sit there with him and I would love him right on back. So they said that they found him, and I calmed down because I'm believing it's going to be all right. And I am transported to the hospital, and this is maybe 20 minutes post-fire. My father is there to meet me in the emergency room. And I told him, I'm telling him, I want in the same room as Tony. We can recuperate together, and if I've got to stay, I would rather be in my child's room. And my dad looks at me and said, I don't know why they led you to believe that he was alive, but he's not. And he had just said that to me, and a police officer walked in and said they were there for my statement. And so I'm looking at him, and of course I want to know what happened. So I say, yes, I'm absolutely ready to do a statement. And my dad steps up and says, no, she's not ready. You haven't even let her be admitted to the hospital. You need to wait. So they take me up to my room. And of course, the only people that see me at that time is my family. So my mom and my stepmom are in there trying to clean me up because my hair is burned, my eyelashes, my eyebrows. I have cuts on my feet, cuts on my hand where I tried to climb in there and claw my way back in. And so they shower me because I'm in shock. I can't move, I don't know what to say. And most of the time I'm sitting there not believing it's true. 2 hours post-fire, I have 2 police detectives in the hospital room with me, and they tell me that they know at this point it's an arson, and that somebody intentionally came in there to try to murder me and my child. And they want a list of all my family and friends who would have had access. So I gave them the list, and then I looked at those people standing in my hospital room and told them they needed to leave because I now looked at them as suspects. Every person that could have given me a hug or held my hand, because I was raised when the police tell you something, it's the truth. They're there to be the good guys and do the right thing. So I said I needed to leave. I was going to my son's babysitter's house because he had a playroom that was Tony's, and I was going to stay in there because I wanted to be around something of my child's. And so they got me released, and I went over there and I sat in that room all day and all night. And at 11:30 at night, they asked if I would come to the police station. So I went wearing borrowed clothes and no shoes because I'd lost everything. And they put me in a room about this size. And when they say that, you can leave, if you've got an officer here and an officer here and one behind you, you pretty much know you can't leave. So they started talking to me about insurance. They wanted to know about my insurance. My first thought is, they found out I don't have car insurance because I couldn't afford that. And then I realized, no, they were talking about life insurance. And so I'm looking at them because I couldn't afford insurance on my car. How am I going to afford it on my child? And I'm still just a baby myself. I feel invincible. Why would I think something would happen to my child? So at that point, I am so angry and I'm screaming at them. And so here comes my family in and says, this is done. We're taking her home. So the next day, here come the police officers to talk to the funeral director because they wanted to know if I said something to him that, hinted that I was guilty. And at that moment, the moment they have you in your sights, they are making a case against you. And so if you are a good girl who's never been in trouble with the law, then they're going to come up with absolutely everything they possibly can. So every boyfriend you've ever had, the fact that I was playing a Bon Jovi song at my child's funeral, but we sang that together. That was the music I listened to. That was the music he listened to. But of course, you got to try to make some connotation out of that. And as we went and arranged for flowers and a casket, they followed to ask what I said and did I talk to anybody. And some people said no. She couldn't stop crying. She didn't say anything, her family blamed it. But others thought it was really exciting, and so they had a lot to say about what I had to say, which was truthfully nothing. But they said things like, oh yes, I knew that was gonna happen, and oh yes, I had to do this because of a boyfriend or whatever. So they systematically started character assassinating me. And honestly, I was in such a fog, I didn't notice. It didn't penetrate what was happening in those moments. I was just focused on my baby, my loss, what I was never gonna have again. So at my son's funeral, they showed up and they wanted to talk right then. They wanted another interview. And I said, I don't want to speak to you anymore. I just want you to tell me what I can do to make this stop. Because I don't want to talk, I don't want to think about it, and I don't want to hear any more accusations. And so they said, well, take a lie detector and it will be over. So I agreed. I would have agreed to anything in that moment because I wanted it over. And they take me in, and so we're in a room, big room like this. I'm up here facing the wall, all hooked up to the monitors, and he's back in the very back asking me questions. And sometimes I had to strain to hear him, and other times he was loud, like he was right in my ear. And so it didn't last very long. I mean, just minutes. And then he was over there taking everything off of me and said, I've determined the truth. You did this, and you just need to tell me what you did. And I said, no, that's not correct. And he said, look, I know after this test that you did this and you just need to tell me. And I said, I don't care what you know, I don't know. I was arrested right after that, charged with murder and arson. And the headline the very next day was, when I was asked why I started the fire, I said, I don't know. And so I wind up in the jail, and I go in for bail, and the judge says to me, have you been in trouble with the law, Ms. Bunch? And I said, oh, yes, sir, I got a warning for going 5 miles over. And he was like, nothing else? And I was like, no. So I got bail, and I thought, it's okay. It's okay, this is gonna work out. The truth is supposed to set you free. You don't realize that once you're in that situation, it's stacked against you. There is no more your truth. There is their version of the truth. So I had a public defender, and everything he told me to get ready for this, I did. He said, your hair's too blonde, it's too big, you wear too much makeup, I feel like sometimes I can see too much throat, and that's not good because they're gonna think you're a loose woman. And I said, okay. So I went out, I got new clothes, something that would cover me completely up in dark drab colors that wouldn't draw attention. And my hair was bound back most of the time, and I couldn't make it any less blonde. But I did try to keep it a little smaller. And I made sure that I had no makeup on. And when he said, you don't react, I didn't react. They said everything they could about me every single day, and I didn't say a word. I just sat there. And when you're sitting there and there's nobody in that courtroom for you, because my prosecutor was nice enough to put my entire family and friends on the witness list, even though he knew he wasn't going to call them, but then they couldn't enter the courtroom. So every day my family sat outside the courtroom, and by the time the day was over, they were the ones to help me get to the car because I couldn't stop sobbing as soon as no one was looking because it hurt. Every single thing they said about me, it hurt. And I had no recourse, I had no voice, I had to trust this man that he was doing the right thing for me, and I just had to go forward. And the situation was 10 times worse because I was pregnant with my second son. So I did what I was told, And I thought, it's still gonna come out okay. And then my jury was told that fire investigators had found accelerant in my son's room. And so they produced a report, and that made no sense to me because I knew of no accelerant in his room. I certainly knew that I hadn't bought any accelerant, I hadn't put anything there. But, I mean, I'm a parent, and if I sat on that jury and I heard that something was found in a child's bedroom, I can't tell you I would have quit. I absolutely would not. Somebody would have to answer for that. So I understood. I understood when I got that guilty verdict. I understood when I was sentenced to 60 years, and then an additional 50 for arson, and my judge was nice enough to merge those together. So I only had 60 years. And then he went on to tell me that I had gotten myself pregnant in order to get sympathy from the court. And that I was never going to see that child. He was going to make that baby a ward of the state. And I would never know what happened. So I stood there and I didn't cry. I didn't react. I did everything I was supposed to. And then I was taken back to the county jail, and my family came over to see me because the county wasn't set up for a pregnant woman. And I was being transferred immediately to the maximum security facility for women. My family got 5 minutes with me. My baby brother, who was 17, told me, "You don't ask anybody for anything. You don't ever owe anybody for anything. I will take care of everything you need, and I'm going to take care of that baby." And he said, "You don't worry about it." I would like to say that I believed him totally, but he's a 17-year-old kid. But he walked away from high school and started working 3 jobs, and he took care of absolutely everything. And when I got there, it was horrible. Prison is the ugliest place ever, and if you're a baby killer, it's 20 times worse. So my very first night, 4 girls let me know that they were going to get me in the shower and make sure I never gave birth. The guard wouldn't let me out to go to the restroom. She said I should have thought about that before I killed my son. And then the next morning, I passed out in the breakfast line, and they had me over in the superintendent's office talking about I was trying to kill this baby too. I wasn't taking care of myself. And I broke down and told that woman that she didn't know me, and I'm sure she had heard it before, but that I was innocent. And I was never going to stop until I proved that. And this is what they were doing to me on that dorm, and my baby was not safe. And she said, "What about your pregnancy snacks?" And I said, "They haven't given me a single snack. I've never even had a milk." So she immediately moved the guard, got a new set of guards over there, and I was put into open population faster than most people. In there, the people that embraced me were the worst of the worst. They were the people that I had read headlines about, and they were the people that watched my back and protected me while I was pregnant. The first thing I did was go to the law library and make sure that judge hadn't issued an order to take my child. And he hadn't. He had forgotten that. So I knew that my family was going to get him, and they were going to make sure he was taken care of. And I waited, because you have to wait for your direct appeal. And they tell you that's going to take a year. It took almost 2 before I got it. And they said they considered it double jeopardy to charge me with both murder and arson. So they were going to dismiss the arson, vacate that charge, and just leave me with murder. And I'm not, at that point, I was high school educated. I hadn't had any college, but it just didn't sit right with me that you were going to get rid of that arson charge and leave me with the murder. I felt like you should have given me the arson, because it was a fire, and got rid of the murder charge. So I started working, and after I gave birth, and yes, you give birth in handcuffs and shackles, and when you're put out for an emergency C-section like me, then they take off the shackles because you are unconscious, but then you wake up to a leg chain fastening you to the bed. Not like I could have moved after you've split me open, but they make sure. So I decided that I was going to do something, because obviously I couldn't ask my family to do anything else. They had my kid. They were doing all that they could. I saw him every week. I knew he had everything he needed. And so the entire time that I was there, I worked 3 jobs, or I worked 2 jobs and went to school. Now, a job in there means I could work 8 hours in the kitchen and I'm getting paid $1. So for 3 full-time jobs, I made $3 a day. But I would rather be out doing something than sitting in my dorm. You get 100 letters free each month to go to attorneys. I used every single one of those. And I wrote everybody. It didn't matter what kind of attorney you were. I was writing you. If it said attorney, who knows? I could get a tax attorney. Somebody would come up and so I wrote those letters, and I'm doing things. I am training service dogs for disabled kids. I am getting associate's and bachelor's degrees through Ball State University, paralegal certificate, cosmetology license, desktop publishing, heck, another associate's degree in theology, anything they brought in, because I was going to show them, you don't know me. Everything you said about me, that is not me. So I went along, I'm doing all that I can, I'm writing people, and finally, this pregnant girl, who I brought cookies back from the kitchen because I had a soft spot for the pregnant girls. And finally she said, why are you in here? And I told her. And she said, I'm going to write my attorney and ask her to take a look at your case. That time I'd been there for almost 5 years. And I was like, that would be incredible. So Hillary took a look at my case, walked into the prison, and said, I absolutely believe you, and I don't know how we're going to prove it. And I started crying, and I said, we're going to prove it. All I needed was one person that didn't know me to believe in me. And so after that, I'm busy in that law library. I work there full time now. It's one of my full-time jobs, and I volunteer on my downtime. I take my service dog with me. We spend a lot of time in there, and I read an arson myth article. And so every single thing in that article, pour patterns, concrete spalling, V patterns, all these things are now myths. It's like, those are all the things I'm convicted of. That's the terminology they used in my paperwork. So, honestly, I didn't understand most of what they said. But we had a cute little old lady in there who was there for medical, but her husband was a fire chief. And so I just happened to mention to her that I would really like to talk to him. So he started writing me letters. And I could make copies of reference material, but it was 10 cents a copy, and I could only get 25 copies each week. So each week, my little librarian went out and copied me 25 pages of the National Fire Protection Agency's Manual 921. And it took almost a year for me to get the entire manual, but they explained a V pattern, which simply means that something burned here next to the wall and the smoke made a V pattern. I expected something a little more thrilling than that. But the pour patterns, that I think bothered me the most, because they said that was an indicator that something was poured there. But then I realized, if this room were to go up in flames, we would have patterns where people walk in the door and up those steps, and back behind here and up those steps. Because the more you walk on something, the more those fibers get compressed. And so when things go to burn, the stuff that's fluffy, that nobody's touched, it's going to burn fast because it's got plenty of oxygen. But this stuff that's been ground down, where you can see a million shoes have went up on it, it's going to burn differently. So I'm reading this and I'm thinking, how exactly do we detect an arson? And literally it all comes down to that lab report that said there was accelerant, because these pour patterns and V patterns, that doesn't mean jack anymore. So I talked to my lawyer and I said, we need to find somebody. So So I read another article about two gentlemen that saved a man from death row and proved that it wasn't an arson, it was an accidental fire. And so I called my attorney and said, I'm gonna need you to call them. And she said, they're the best. I said, I know. But they thanked God that they saved a person, and they're gonna thank God because they're gonna save me. And she said, all right. So she called the first one. She got a secretary. They said $300 an hour. She was like, okay. She said, we can't afford that. She said, I'm gonna give up. So she told me she was gonna give up. And I told her I was gonna call her office every single day until she called him. And after about almost 2 weeks, she realized that was true. And so she called him, and surprisingly, he gave us 20 hours free. And she said, I don't even know what I said to him, but she said he's given us 20 hours free. And so I said, okay. I said, that's what we need. So in the meantime, I'm talking to this fireman whose wife is in there for fraud on a bingo of all things. And he's telling me what to look for. And he was like, you need your medical reports. He said, you were treated for smoke inhalation. What was your carbon monoxide level? I was like, I don't know. Did they test for that? He was like, yes, they tested for it. And he said the accelerant. He said it's not true that they can't identify it. He said when you get to this part in the manual, you are going to see that they can identify everything from the raw data. You need that raw data. I was like, well, how do I get that? And he said, Freedom of Information Act, send it right up to the ATF, they'll send you the file. Well, they're going to ignore it if you send it from a law library in a prison. They're just not going to pay attention to that. So I was like, okay. But in the meantime, I'm still talking to people. I let some woman use my story in a book because I thought more people involved, something is going to happen. And one of the church volunteers heard about my story, knew me, knew the things that I did around the prison, and she stepped to me and said, I need to know your story. And I told her. And she went to Northwestern University in Chicago. They have a wrongful conviction center. And she stayed there all day until she met one of the attorneys. And she said, I just need you to look at this girl's case. And so Betsy became my unofficial bulldog. And she stayed on Northwestern University because I had written them. And you get the standard letter back. We do not have enough staff or enough resources to take a case like this. So I didn't write them back. And then lo and behold, they came to see me. And I found out they were going to take my case. That moment that an Innocence Project came in with my students that were now working on my case, that was the moment I was exonerated. It wasn't walking out. It was those people that knew, people that heard my truth, people that were going to be my voice and save my life. That was the moment. And I knew it was going to get better. They were going to make a difference. And I had cute little young kids like you that were telling me about everything that was happening in the world, and it was fabulous. And I thought, this is going to happen. Now, this is 2007. So I have been there a really long time, and I think, something is going to happen. And so they're like, where are we going to go from here? And I said, oh, well, hey, I've got some guy, 20 hours free working. He's a fire investigator. She was like, and who is it? She said, I'm sure, I probably don't know the name. I said, Richard Roby. She said, I know that name. He's giving you 20 hours free. I said, yes, he saved a man from death row. Now he's working on me. She was like, okay. She said, we're going to need to contact him. I said, yes, you should. And I said, we need that ATF report. And she said, I'll have to get a subpoena. And she said, why do we want it? And I said, because NAFPA 921 says there is a gas chromatograph meter, and it measures every single accelerant that's ever been tested. And I said, so I want to see the raw data for what was found in my child's bedroom, and I want it identified. And she said, okay. She said, I agree with that. So she got the subpoena, and when we got that report, we discovered that an altered report had been used to convict me The original report was still sitting in my file that said no accelerant had been found in my child's bedroom. And in that moment, that is the angriest I've ever been in my life, because I couldn't believe somebody would just do that. And you didn't even know me, and you just stole my whole life. So I thought that's in essence the smoking gun. That's the Perry Mason moment. I'm gonna go home. It doesn't work like that. You have to fight to get back into court. So it wasn't until 2009 when we walked back in for that evidentiary hearing in front of my original judge, my original prosecutor. And of course, by that time, I wasn't alone. I had that local attorney. I had the Center on Wrongful Convictions from Northwestern University, who's part of the Innocence Network. And I had Ron Safer, who was a 25-year federal prosecutor veteran and now into his own private practice. And this man came on because the man who wrote the National Fire Protection Agency's Manual 921, he needed $500,000 to review my case. And so his firm put up that money. And then for the very first time in his career, he testified for the defense instead of the prosecution in my case. So they covered the cost for that, and they covered the cost for the guy that was giving us 20 hours pro bono, because that turned into be new fire science, because his little gal is a forensic toxicologist. And she looked at my son's autopsy and realized that he was at an 80% carbon monoxide level. And he didn't die from burns. He was gone before the fire even broke out. So an arson burns too hot and too fast to give off that level of poison. But an electrical fire in a wall or a ceiling smolders for a long time and will give off that much carbon monoxide. She also explained why so many people afterwards had different reactions about me and about the way I was, because one man had a mental breakdown and said all he could hear was my screams. And another woman said that I was saying he was locked in the room. And so they pursued that and tried for a long time to say that I'd locked him into his room, but then they realized that I was a mom that worried about that, so there wasn't even a door on his bedroom. So they had talked a fireman into saying that I'd shoved a chair in that doorway to block it. So when we went in for that evidentiary hearing, my attorneys, we had the exculpatory evidence that hadn't been turned over. We also had, this new fire science, and we had an original picture from my trial. It was a trial exhibit, and they blew it up so that you could see there was no chair in that doorway. And my original judge took as long as he possibly could, and on the very last day denied my motion. And so my attorneys come in and told me, we have one chance out of 100 that the appellate court will hear it. And I said, if you want to give up. And he said, we're never going to give up. He said, I don't care where we have to go with this, we will never stop. And I said, then we need to put in for it. And 6 months later, they did oral arguments in front of the appellate court. And I was reversed and remanded for a new trial based on new evidence and a Brady violation. I walked out August 22nd, 2012, to a 16-year-old son, and the realization that I'm now preparing for another murder trial, and I had nothing to my name. I had taken the LSAT before I left. I was one of the few people granted permission, and I thought I was going to law school. And then I walked out and realized I had to worry about a place to live. There was no more dreams of what you're going to do in the future. It's about the now, the immediate. I had to go back to that prison where I spent 17 years of my life and get an ID 2 days later to prove who I was. I wasn't eligible for any services. I couldn't get help on a resume when I went into re-entry and said, I just need to explain this hole. And she said, when were you convicted? And I said, 1996. She said, there's nothing on the books. And I said, well, I've been exonerated. And she said, and you're ineligible. I was like, ineligible? I lost 17 years. She was like, yeah, no. It just looks like you've been gone. Okay, so I started working, and I started doing counseling, and I tried to connect with my teenager, and well, he's a teenager, so it wasn't an easy thing. But, I mean, the good thing was, something happens when you're in there for so long, and you don't age up here the same way as what you would on the outside. So all the things that he wanted to do, I wanted to do too, because I'm still just 22. And I was like, oh, rock concert? Yeah, the last 3 days? That's cool. So I mean, we've managed to get there. It's still touch and go. But, I mean, it was really hard for him because, you know, I ventured out to see what kind of work I could get, who I could work with. And of course, I left my family and friends and I moved to Chicago on my own to see if I could make it. And after 2 years of working in student engagement at Northwestern University, I felt like I could do anything because students help. Oh my God, every question that I was embarrassed to ask, a student would tell me and I'd be like, oh, well, they're just figuring it out too. So they got that. And when I'm trying to get a deal on cable, they're like, oh no, ask him for this, ask him for this coupon. Or when they're saying, do you need a router? I was like, no, I don't need that. And they're over there going, so I covered this up and he said, that's what pulls in the Wi-Fi. I said, oh, I need that. So they were able to break it down in a different way, a way that I didn't feel, I guess, inferior the way I did around my peers because they lived a different life. And I realized we need more of that. So I went back home and I started a non-for-profit. It is called J for J, for short. It's just for just us. And so another exoneree and I co-founded it, and we literally will do anything and everything. We do gas cards, we do brand new boxes when people walk out, so that's clothing, hygienes, whatever. We will throw you a gas card if you're worried about getting back and forth to work. We will send you a grocery card if you just have a bad week. Pay an electric bill, a heating bill. We don't give out money, but I have volunteers that if I hand them a bill and say this guy's going to get put out, they will put up the money for it. And we are unique because we get dentists and doctors and therapists to donate services to exonerees, and I can give them a tax write-off for that. So it was a lot of work. We've been up for 2 years. I have had an operating budget of less than $20,000 each year, and we've managed to help about 80 some exonerees. So we're doing it. I mean, eventually I want us to have exonerees hired in every single state, and we have centers that truly help people when they get out because the PTSD and the issues we go through, they're very real. And while I look like I have it all together, I spin out a lot. And my counselor, who has been with me for 5 years, takes all that and deals with it. And my baby brother, who is still there, supporting me and making sure that I'm okay, redirects me when I get off on a mode and I can't let it go. And he's like, just go do something else. I've got this. And I take him and make him go speak with me to talk about what it's like on our family members because it's hard. And they go through every bit as much as we do. And as if I didn't have enough to do because I work a part-time job so I can pay the bills because J for J doesn't make enough money to pay me or anyone else at this moment, but it's coming. And so I have my little part-time job, and then I also do advocacy work. So I have spoken with the Innocence Project in other states for advances in new science and to get, you know, those pesky little sentences that say, oh, you have 2 years to put in for new evidence. No, that should be an open-ended thing. It should be an easy thing to get somebody in there when we prove that they are innocent, and it's just not. And in my own state, we are working on compensation because Indiana has nothing. And we started out with a bill that was supposed to be $25,000 a year for DNA only going forward. That was last year. This year, we are up to $50,000 a year for every exoneration they only wanted it to go forward, but after I showed up and kept talking to them about it, now it's gonna include 33 of the 35 exonerees we have. So everybody that hasn't got something is going to get something. So I spend a lot of time working on that and a lot of time at the State House. And in my free time, I get to travel around to incredible places like Utah, and I get to speak to incredible students who don't realize the impact you are making, the difference you are gonna make to your clients if you go work in the center, because you might be their only voice. And if you see something that no one else does and you step up for them, you can save them. And that's a huge responsibility, but it's also so gratifying to know you made an impact. And every single student that worked on my case, I stay in touch with them, I meet them for lunch, I get pictures of their kids, we do Christmas cards. It is the most incredible moment that I've ever experienced, because those were the first people that became my friends. Those were the first people that reached out to me and told me what it was like in the real world, and didn't make me feel like I was less than because I was there. So I am honored to be here, to be speaking about the Rocky Mountain Innocence Center, because you guys are a little bitty baby and you handle 3 states, and you bring people home and you do new legislation. And you can rock at it, excuse me. But, I mean, that's huge. And this school, I mean, everything here, I'm so excited about what you're doing, how much it can grow, and how many more of you can get involved. So I will tell you that we're gonna have a little time for questions. And, I mean, feel free, I've had every question. Nothing is off the table. If it's too raunchy, I'll tell you later. But I thank you for having me, and I'm honored to be here among you.
I'm sure I already know the answer to this, but did anything ever happen to those that falsified the accelerant reports?
I have a civil suit that's been pending for 5 years, and they were granted summary judgment on immunity, and we fought that, and I was able to pierce immunity, so we are proceeding forward now.
So they didn't get promoted like it usually happens?
No, actually, the man that falsified the report, he died right before I was released. And I probably wouldn't have pushed this hard for it, but I've discovered there are 2 other gentlemen that are incarcerated in other states, and we have the same chemist listed on our paperwork for arson. And I feel like if he could do it to me, he could have done it to anybody. So at this point, I can't set it aside. We have to push forward and let people know this happened, and it's probably happened over and over.
So as a law student, I'm just curious, how has this changed your perspective on the criminal justice system and kind of essentially becoming a victim of the criminal justice system? How has it changed your perspective on it?
So, I mean, don't misunderstand me. We have a good system. It is designed to work. The problem is we aren't designed to get it right, and we are the ones running it. So we don't have enough people looking over our shoulder and saying, "Are you sure you got this right?" We don't have enough people that are willing to stand up within that system and say, "You know what? You haven't looked at any other possibility." And we have fierce immunity laws to protect the people that would put us away. So in my opinion, the very first thing I would want to see happen to fix our system is we get rid of absolute immunity. And if somebody lies on me and takes 17 years of my life, I want you to go spend 17 years of yours. That's clearly not ever going to happen, but I do believe we are making advances to make it fairer. On the flip side of that, I believe education is so important. I've been honored to speak at the Police Training Institute, and it's scary as hell with all those cops in there. But at the end of it, you could see healing and acceptance on both parts. They were really, very eager to find ways that, they could step up their game and they could make sure that they didn't judge somebody on the way they looked or the way they were reacting or what was happening in that moment, because we all carry bias. We don't want to think we do, and we think it's some kind of bad thing. It's not, it's just what we grew up with. My grandpa was very prejudiced, and I would like to say that I'm not, but I can still hear his voice in my head when I meet somebody and think, oh yeah. And just like for women, women are the worst when it comes to being accused of something, because we have an idea on what's beautiful, what's acceptable, what's decent. How many times has somebody heard, oh, look how she's walking and wearing that, she's loose. And so those things stick with us. It doesn't make us bad people. It's, actually something that if we admit, we can step away from, we can get past it. And I feel like all too often we don't do that. A police officer looks at somebody and says, they did it, that's it. And that's what we need to stop. We need to get them to have an open mind. For myself, my open mind started when the first responder, the police officer was there, came to me and said, I should have had you tested for carbon monoxide. I should have looked at those 5 statements that were so different and said, something's wrong with that girl. He said, but I didn't. And he said, I feel like I have some fault here too. And I just wanted to ask your forgiveness. I wasn't a big enough person in that moment to give it, but since have reached out to him and told him that I understand. And so I feel like if we take a more active role, and it's not a big thing. I speak to community groups all the time, just, being aware of who's running for office, what their platforms are, what is important to them, and what we can do to kind of point them in the right direction. That's our duty. And all too often, we're screaming at people, you need to go vote. You should be running to vote. You should be making sure that the right things are getting into our system. That's the only way we're gonna put it back to rights.
Can you talk a little bit about, women are the fastest growing group of exonerees. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some biases that exist in the criminal justice system?
Yes, okay, so Northwestern University has a women's project. It is the only one in the country. You are able to get on their website and access that information. Of the women that have come out, over 40% have been involved with the death of a child, a significant other, a family member, someone close. So, knowing what they did to me, I know that they took advantage of a vulnerable situation. You do not know how you are going to react when somebody you love dies. Some people break down and cry. Some people sit there in shock. And we all have this belief in our heart of that's how I would have acted, and she didn't act that way. So women automatically have this high number that they have to reach because we have a clear picture in our mind of what a mom's supposed to look like. And they were supposed to be a Betty Crocker, and they were supposed to stay home, and they were supposed to make cookies, and their hair was supposed to be cut accordingly, and everything was always good for them. And now you have moms with big hair, and they wear too much makeup, and they've got tattoos, and their nose is pierced, and they get told something, and they don't break down and cry. They just shut down. And so because we expect them to be sobbing and falling down on the ground, we say they're not acting right. We don't say they're in shock. They don't say they're gonna cry later. We say she's cold and she's going down. And that's what happens. And then they continue to character assassinate her on these huge levels because women don't have DNA. So the big DNA rush that got all of these people exonerated, that's not gonna happen in a woman's case. So most of our cases are new fire science. And so a case like mine is gonna cost about, I think Ron said he put $5 million together to bring me home. A case like Sabrina, who was on death row, and I think it was Alabama, for the death of one of her kids. They later found out when the other one died and she was sitting on death row that they had some rare medical disorder and that woman hadn't done anything. But in that moment, women are weak. They're vulnerable and they're taking advantages. And our little innocent centers are unable to meet the need to fight a woman's case because it's either an accidental fire like mine and no crime occurred, and you have to prove that to get them out of prison, or it's a medical problem, or it's shaken baby, which has since been debunked, and I can't believe how many women have been accused of that, instead of looking at medical science first for an answer. Well, this is an easy group. Nobody wanted to know about Orange is the New Black or 60 Days In.
Did the judge who denied your petition for the new evidentiary hearing, did he explain why, or if you ever heard an apology from him?
No, as a matter of fact, when I got reversed and remanded, he took off for vacation for a month, and the pro temp judge wasn't going to do anything to have me released. So my attorneys had to go back to the appellate court and issue an order to have me released or at least put out on bond. I have never seen him. However, I am Facebook friends with his son, and his son has come to several of my events for my organization. And he has said some incredible things about his dad, and I mean, I don't understand why it's hard. I don't feel like it should be hard. When we make a mistake, we should be able to say, you know what, we made a mistake. For some reason, our judges and prosecutors and even police officers feel like they can't ever say that. So I really wish that we could somehow breach that with them and make it to where they could say, okay, we screwed up. Yes, things have changed now, this person's innocent, they're gonna go. That's the right thing to do. We haven't caught up with that yet.
I apologize if I missed this, because you might have said it already, but is your organization only in Indiana right now, or is it in more states?
So we are in Indiana and Illinois, but if, you know, any of the wonderful lawyers I know call me from another state and say, we've got somebody coming out, they've been in for 27 years, these are their sizes, me and my volunteers get together and we put them together a package, and they get really happy when it's a woman because then you can do makeup and perfume and all that good stuff. The guys are like, oh, it's just a shaving kit. But yeah, so we have reached out to 10 different states, and I mean, technically we should have a representative in that state, but I just always say, well, you know, it was a gift, and we push it off. But eventually we'll branch out.
Have you thought about partnering with Innocence Clinics at all? Like, in like the sense that you kind of are working towards the same goal, or like, has there ever been any collaboration with?
So I'm a speaker. I'm on the Speakers Bureau for the Innocence Project, and I go around and talk about a lot of women's cases, that kind of thing. And but our, you know, my organization and their organization are two different things, because these lawyers bring us out, and in truth we should have some kind of reparations from the state. We do not. So for me, I just want people to know I have, you know, people to work with you, to help you with your resume. I have people that are willing to mentor you. I have people that are willing to see you as a doctor and not charge you. Those are things that our lawyers can't take on. They're fighting for the next person. So while I do partner with them in a sense of telling them, hey, you know, I just got 5 cell phones donated. If you know somebody, give me a call. Beyond that, no, not with my organization, because I can't lobby or advocate for anything. Anything I do that's advocacy work, that's just Kristine Bunch, the exoneree.
Was the falsification of the arson report done for money? You know, like, did the person who falsified it do it for money?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know who would have paid him.
But then why, did you have a reason why someone would do that?
No, there is no reason. I think that, most of the time when people get arrested, they committed to saying this person is guilty and they don't want to give up on it. And so most of the time they are making the evidence fit.
So there's a few of us here that work on criminal justice reform policy, and so my question from your perspective is, what do you think are some of the most necessary changes to kind of prevent your situation from happening to other people?
Definite and necessary changes. I really wish that it wasn't, a right for me to ask for an attorney. I wish the moment that I was arrested, you said nothing to me and an attorney was automatically brought in. Because it's all well and good to say, don't say anything and, wait. But people are scared when that happens, especially if they've never been in trouble. So having somebody right there to protect their interest would be a great first start. Making sure that interrogations are videotaped, that would be a great first start. And definitely protecting our youth. There are entirely too many kids that have been railroaded into something and given plea agreements. And so I don't believe there are enough safeguards for them. I could give you a whole list, but I'll stop at 3.
So I have some questions about your public defender. It seems like he said a lot of things to you that seem to really buy into a lot of the stereotypes about women that are really part of the problem.
Mhm.
And instead of really taking his platform to maybe show the court who you are as a person, he really sort of used it to damper who you are as a person down and say that like that doesn't belong here. It's sorry.
Right.
And so, one of the things that I always think about when I look at innocence cases, I think, why is the prosecution in charge of giving the defense exculpatory evidence like that? Yeah, okay, it goes wrong, like, obviously, like, and so I wonder, if let's say that your defense attorney had received the actual arson records, do you think he would have even put it together? Do you think he would have, your trial would have been able to change if the evidence had been more transparent?
Absolutely, yes, because, so even at my trial, they were already talking about flashover. So flashover occurs when carbon monoxide has been building in a closed space. And then when it finally sparks, everything goes all at once. So it looks like an arson when you just go in and look at it. But in truth, it happened through an accidental cause. So they had that grasp. And I had investigators that were talking about this had occurred. But with, a false report saying some kind of an accelerant was there was no way they were gonna jump from accidental to intentional. And that report, my prosecutor claims he had never seen it. But of course, he still claims that, I'm not innocent and he did not make a mistake and all those good things because, they don't want to say that.
Well, I know some of you have to get to class. I really want to thank you for coming. Look, she gets the water bottle. Why? We're the view. Thank you all so much for coming. And really, if you have questions about working with Rocky Mountain Innocence Center and the Innocence Clinic in your next couple of years here at the law school, let us know, because we're here and we're doing this work. So Thank you again to Kristine.
All the puppies.